Author Donna Jodhan presents Dario's Daughter. Dario had brought her up to be a lady, and his dream for her would be that she would remain a lady for life. That was his dream, but not hers. Dario's daughter had very different dreams. Dreams that sadly and tragically turned into reality. Find out how this lady of luxury turned into a lady of the night, and how her final destination ended in tragedy.
Hello, 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 it's Detective DJ, and welcome to another show of ours, another really gripping and exciting episode that's called Dario's Daughter. I hope that everyone is having a terrific day and that so far this week yours has been a great one, and that you have not forgotten to keep on smiling, because you know what? If you smile at the world, it will smile back at you. I know you know that. And I want to thank you for having tuned in to listen to us once more. And I hope that you are enjoying our episodes as much as we are enjoying bringing it to you. We've had tremendous feedback to our episodes, and we know that you are listening to it, so please continue to listen to it. Well, for this week, or for this day, or whatever it is, when was the last time you did listen to one of our episodes? We would like to tell you that this episode is really one of twists and turns, and we know that you have already heard the description to this episode, so we don't want to delay you any longer. We want to dive right in. But before we do so, we want to tell you about our team one more time, okay? So, we have me as Detective DJ. We have Dr. Shay Harrington, our resident psychologist. Chip Sanderson, who is our right-hand man and crime scene investigator, or private investigator, whichever you wish to refer to him as. Dr. Ryan Martini, our crime scene specialist. Dr. Nicholas Gasquet, who is our resident pathologist. And Alex Kirchhoff, our resident guru and whiz kid. So, without much more ado, let's dive right into this day's episode. As always, I'd like to start off with a description of what's happening moments before this crime takes place. It is a typical winter's evening in February. It is the evening of Valentine's Day. And there is a Valentine's Day dance taking place at a high school, and the high school's hall is crowded with lots of youngsters dancing the evening away. At a classy downtown hotel, a Valentine's Day dance is in progress, and the ballroom is crowded with people who are well dressed in long dresses and tuxedos. While out in a snow-covered field, a small group of young adults are snowshoeing on a tree-lined path. Very picturesque. And the trees are all covered in snow. Lovely. The scene of this crime is as follows. The cops have been called to the scene of a frozen pond, where some skaters have just discovered a body, as someone had spotted a bright purple ski jacket in the middle of the frozen pond and had called their mates to come and have a look. Upon further inspection by the skaters, it was discovered that a body had lain beneath the purple jacket. And it is at this point that someone had used their cell phone to call the cops. The cops had come very quickly indeed, as they had been presently investigating a high-profile murder. And their haste had been rewarded in a bittersweet way. My. The body was well frozen, but not enough to prevent immediate recognition by the cops. First, they cleared the scene of the ice skaters, who were only too happy to go about their own business of ice skating. They next used their hands to brush the snow and ice away from the corpse's hair and face. And they took their time in doing this, brushing gently away at the hair and the facial area. And it did not take long for them to recognize the body after this. But of course, it had to be carried out formally. The cops were quite certain that it was the body of Jennifer Schuyler, the daughter of shipping magnate Dario Schuyler. Now their work would begin in earnest. Well, Dr. Shea has something to say at this stage, and as I've always said throughout, Dr. Shea always has something to say about anything and everything. Dr. Shea is pontificating that the killer used this location because it was a remote location. And she pontificated as well that it could have been because of its remoteness, that the victim could have been here somehow, but she's not quite sure this time as to why the victim could have been here. So she doesn't really have a theory as to the reason for the victim being here. She's not sure at this time. So let's move on, and we will now go to the motives for the crime as Chip is thinking, and let's see what he has to say. Chip is a bit stale in his motives, and I say this because in most of Chip's investigations, he comes up with almost the same types of motives for each of our episodes. But, that's just my comment, and we're going to move on, okay? Chip has put forth the following suite of motives. Blackmail. Someone could probably have snitched on someone else. Or maybe, and this motive is kind of different, a case of a smuggling ring settling accounts. Different? Yeah. The profile of the suspect, as put forth by Shea, is as follows. The suspect was very, very deliberate in what they had done, and knew what they were doing. He had chosen his time and place extremely carefully, and had known how to lure Jennifer. The suspect was cunning, as well as resourceful. Every movement seemed to be planned way ahead of time, and there was no turning back for this one. Chip's investigations show the following. Jennifer Schuyler had been the daughter of Dario Schuyler, a very wealthy shipping magnate, and she was an only child. Jennifer's mom had died while giving birth to Jennifer, and Dario had never really gotten over his wife's death. He had done his best to bring up Jennifer to be a lady. But, alas, Jenny, as he had called her, had deliberately chosen to go the other way, often bringing great stress and disappointment to her dad. This did not prevent Dario, however, from continuing to try with his daughter, sending her to the best of private schools and providing her with the best of nannies. Jenny was a very bright student and excelled at school. Upon graduation from high school, Dario had taken her on an extensive tour around Europe, and dad and daughter had spent a lot of time on the Riviera. It was here that Jenny had been introduced to another life, one that her dad did not approve of. But he was powerless to stop his daughter from going down a dangerous path. Jenny had left her dad's home shortly after they returned from their trip, promising her dad to start classes at university. But, on the contrary, Jenny had set out on a very different direction. She regularly called home and had made sure to keep in touch with Dario. But, more often than not, she had refused to tell him where she was. And Dario had found out that soon, indeed, she had never started classes. Dario had spent a lot of money to hire personnel to keep an eye on his daughter. Besides, it was his only daughter, and he was so protective of her, and he so loved her. But somehow, Jenny had always managed to stay one step ahead of her dad's men, so that by the time that they had gotten there, Jenny was already gone, and elsewhere. In spite of all of this, Jenny and her dad had remained somewhat close, and Dario had been constantly begging Jenny to come back home. Jenny would promise, but then, alas, Jenny had become involved in several ventures and adventures. She had become a young lady of the night. She had managed to uncover deep, dark secrets of some very high-level officials in very high places through her knack for investigation. She had also become involved in an international ring and had started to run with some very experienced criminals. She had become involved in blackmail, had come to know a bit too much about some money laundering schemes, and had tried to back out of a kidnapping ring, but a bit too late. Jenny had had very few friends through her own choosing, but they all agreed that there were three distinct sides to Jenny. The side that had always sought adventure. The side that had always wanted to right wrongs, but in her own way. And the side that had loved her dad dearly, but again, in her own way, and on her own terms. They also all agreed that there had been a very soft and gentle side to Jenny, one that she had often used to con her victims. But at the same time, there had been a very hard side to young Jenny. Jenny had lived a very fast and wild life, but at age 29, she had been literally stopped dead in her tracks. Now, her dad had been left to ponder and wonder. Why? What had made his precious little girl do all of this? Why did she do it? And was there any way that he could have saved her from herself? Jenny Schuyler's cell phone records, and it was seized, and a lot was garnered from it. Telling evidence was found, and copies of text messages between Jenny and two of the suspects were discovered. Exchanged emails between Jenny and two of the suspects were also found. However, exchanges of emails and texts were not with the same two suspects. Very, very confusing. Jenny's bank records revealed that hefty sums of money had been withdrawn, but at the same time more money had been deposited than was withdrawn, and that two transactions of this type had taken place shortly before her demise. It had also been established that Jenny Schuyler had spent her last waking moments buried in a snowbank. My, poor Jenny Schuyler. It was also theorized that Jenny probably had suffered a massive heart attack elsewhere. Someone had wanted Jenny dead because of the secrets that she had known. Jenny had gone out of her way to befriend this particular man and had taken this relationship to wuthering heights. She had slept with him and had become his confidant in every way. And despite the advice from her friends, Jenny had deliberately gone out of her way to break up this man's marriage. Then, one day, this man had turned on Jenny for something that she had inadvertently unearthed. But there was someone else who had wanted young Jenny dead, because he too had fallen for her soft and gentle persona. And for the sake of adventure, Jenny had managed to pierce his inner sanctum. And soon she was accessing all of his deep, dark secrets and tapping into his deep, dark dealings. The man had come to realize that Jen had gotten to know too much, and upon the advice of his close friends, he had decided to take matters into his own hands. But there was yet a third person who had wanted Jenny out of the way, and it was all due to the adventure that she had entered into a relationship with him and his associates. But one day, Jenny had suddenly gotten cold feet and had decided to back out of this adventure. But by this time, she had gotten to learn too much, and it was too late. She had gotten to learn too much about this man's business, and now it was time to shut her up for good. But this man had decided to bide his time and play a game of chess with young Jenny and wait for the right moment to pounce. Chip has identified the following suspects for us: Emile Gagne, who was a high-profile international banker, Sven Shoemaker, who was a playboy millionaire, and Gino Maserati, a well-known mafia boss. Dr. Nicholas Gasquet has put forth the following as the cause of death for young Jenny Schuyler. Jennifer had died from a massive heart attack that had been brought on by the ingestion of a large dose of pills. Her body had then been taken to a snow-covered pond, and there it had been buried in a thick snowbank. She had been dead for about 3 days before her body was found. And Dr. Nick Gasquet also theorizes that Jenny had probably been alive when she was buried, but just barely. How this could have been done, according to Dr. Nick Gasquet, is that the killer had probably lured Jennifer to a chosen place, then may have poisoned her. Then, when she was incapacitated, they had probably taken her to the frozen pond, and probably could have had help to do it. And there they had buried her, and had snuck away in the gathering darkness. This is very horrifying, but this is what Dr. Nick Gasquet has come up with. I want now to summarize so that I can keep you on track. You know what the crime scene is. A bunch of skaters have found the body, and they first spotted it by seeing a bright purple ski jacket buried in the snowbank. They were ice skating and snowshoeing around the pond. And when they discovered that it could or might be a body, they called the cops, who came extremely quickly, and the cops who were already investigating a high-profile case did not have much trouble in identifying the body after brushing away the snow and ice from the cops' hair and facial area. So you know it was found on a pond. And Dr. Shea Harrington is not really sure as to why the victim could have been there and her reason for being there. But she does theorize that maybe the killer had chosen this particular spot because of its remoteness. Alright? The profile of the suspect. The suspect had probably been very deliberate, and he had known what he was doing. He had chosen his time carefully and his place carefully, and he had known how to lure Jennifer to the place. The suspect had been cunning as well as resourceful. Every movement had been planned way ahead of time, and there was no turning back for this one. We have identified the suspects for you. Emile Gagne. Jennifer had been blackmailing him. Sven Shoemaker. Jennifer had sold him out to the authorities. And Gino Maserati. Jennifer had been involved in an illegal ring with Gino. Alex has some very important questions for you to consider before you start to put the pieces together. And of course, his first question is almost always this one. Which of the suspects could have had the greatest motive and greatest reason for killing young Jennifer Schuyler? Which of them could have turned on Jenny? Which of them could have wanted her dead because she had come to know too much? Which of them could have wanted her dead because she had backed out of their venture? And how about those bank transactions? What would the huge deposit have been for? And why would Jenny have made a huge withdrawal? Which of the two suspects would have exchanged emails with Jenny? And which of the two had exchanged text messages with her? Well, let me bring back the description to you, because you heard this way at the beginning of this episode. But I think this description will have some clues for you. So here goes. Dario had brought up Jenny to be a lady, and his dream for her would be that she would remain a lady for life. That was Dario's dream, but not Jenny's dream. Dario's daughter had had very different dreams and very different ideas. Dreams that had sadly and tragically turned into reality. How her final destiny had turned into tragedy. You know the crime scene, all about that frozen pond on Valentine's night, when everyone else was dancing the night away, the high school students at their high school auditorium, and those partygoers in a very fancy ballroom of a downtown hotel, all dressed up in long dresses and tuxedos. You know about the suspects, Emil Gagne, who Jennifer had been blackmailing, Sven Shoemaker, Jennifer had been in a lot of debt to him, and Gino Maserati, Jennifer had been involved in an illegal ring with this man. And you know the important questions that Alex has put forth? He wants to know which of the suspects could have had the greatest motive for doing this, who could have had the greatest reason for killing young Jenny, and which of them could have turned on Jenny, which of them could have wanted her dead because she had come to know too much about them, which of them could have wanted her dead because she had backed out of their venture and the bank transactions. Why was that huge deposit made? And even more, why was that huge withdrawal made? Why would Jenny have made such a huge withdrawal? And who could have deposited all of that money into Jenny's account? Which of the two suspects would have exchanged emails with her? And which of the two would have exchanged text messages with her? Lots for you to ponder, folks, but I need to move on. Ryan has given us some evidence, in addition to all of this, that he has gathered. Jen had gotten close to all of the suspects in various ways. And in the case of one of them, she had befriended him, broken up his marriage, had learned all about his inner sanctum, and had managed to discover a deep, dark secret about him. In addition, she had been using this secret to blackmail him. But shortly before her demise, this man had dumped Jen, and she had become extremely angry. She and this man had exchanged several emails that had revealed an almost hatred between them. Jen had also recently reported a huge international money laundering scheme to the authorities. And one of the suspects had become the center of this scheme. He had become extremely angry with Jennifer and had begun to hunt her down. The cops had found emails from him to Jennifer on her hard drive, along with text messages from him to her on her cell phone. Text messages had also been found on Jen's cell phone from a third suspect who had been trying to track her down. But it looked as if she had somehow managed to double-cross him. The suspect had been desperately trying to find Jenny, but it appeared that Jenny was hiding from him. Well, I want to give you a bit more about each of the suspects so that you can start getting a better picture as to what's going on here. Okay? Émile Gagné had been a very well-known international banker with a very high profile. He had been married with 2 young sons, but Émile Gagné was a well-known womanizer. He loved younger ladies and had met Jen in a Paris nightclub some years ago. The two had hit it off immediately, and soon enough, Jen and Émile were sleeping together, and she had managed to pierce his inner sanctum. Then Émile's wife had had enough with Jen and her philandering husband, and she had left him. The divorce was brief and nasty, and Jen had been named as the other woman. But then, whereas Jen had thought that Émile would marry her and that she would settle down to be the next Mrs. Émile Gagné, she was very, very, very wrong. Émile Gagné had then dumped Jen unceremoniously after his divorce was final, because he had discovered that there was something that Jen had known about him, something that was very deep and very dark, and something that could destroy him forever and send him to jail for a very long time if she were to ever publicize it. And this could happen if Jen were to take her proof to the FBI. Émile's solution was to dump Jen and to find a way to silence her for good. Upon being dumped, Jen had begun to blackmail Émile, and soon enough, the relationship had developed into a very, very hateful one. And now the secret was about to hit the tabloids, and the blame game was well on the way. Émile had blamed Jen for the leak, and Jen had vehemently denied it. But Émile was having none of it. Émile was prepared to do almost anything to stop this secret from getting out. He still loved Jen, but he also loved his career and freedom. What a suspect. Now we go to Sven Shoemaker. Sven's claim to fame was that he was a very bored international playboy. He was wealthy beyond reason and had used his financial resources to get whatever he wanted. His family had never really been able to control him, let alone his actions. He had had several affairs with some very high-profile married women, as well as with both single and married socialites. He had met Jen on the Riviera, and the two had been immediately attracted to each other. They had both enjoyed high adventure and getting in the middle of things. But whereas Jen had done her best to stay on the right side of the track, it had not been quite so for Sven Shoemaker. Sven had had homes in several countries around the world. and it was not beyond him to drop in on Jen whenever he wanted. At times, Jen had seemed to be under his spell, and she knew it. She had always done her best to protect herself from his advances and obsessions. But alas, it did not always work. When Jen had found out, however, that Sven was engaged in money laundering schemes, she had drawn a distinct line in the sand. She had tried to break off things with him, but he would have none of it. One could say that Sven had even begun to stalk Jen, and Jen had started to run away from him. Jen had carried out her threat to report his money laundering activities, and this had only made Sven even more angry. Sven had been determined to win Jen over no matter what, and he would use both his financial and his computer savvy to do it. Jen had hired some security to protect herself. Now we come to Gino Maserati. Jen and Gino had somehow gotten involved in various business dealings together, and Gino had come to look upon Jen as a daughter. In turn, Jen had come to love Gino as her second dad, and she had even gotten used to calling him Padre. He had taken her under his wing and had taught her much in her short life. He loved her love for life and adventure, and at first he had kept her involved in the above-board ventures. Gino had somehow hoped that one day Jen would become his right hand in every respect of the way. He had hoped that she would become everything to him in the business world. He did not have any daughters of his own, and he had hoped that Jen would fill this gap. But there were some of his associates who had come to resent Jen because they had felt that she was not the right person to be at Gino's side. In their minds, she was too young and too naive. But then one day, Gino had decided that it was time for something new for Jen, and he had started to introduce her to the darkest side of his businesses. At first, Jen had grabbed for this, and she had welcomed the new opportunities. She had always wanted adventure, and she had felt that this was a way to push the envelope to a new horizon. She was also very delighted because she felt that Gino had really come to trust her, and she had come to respect and love him like her second father. She had promised herself that she would do everything in her power not to let him down. But then, Jen had begun to have cold feet, and she had tried to back out of Gino's web, but it was too late. She knew too much. And Gino's associates had advised Gino to get rid of Jen. It was with a heavy heart that Gino had signed her death warrant, giving his minions full range to find and silence Jenny. But before embarking on this, he had desperately tried one more time to convince Jenny to change her mind. Alex, as always, has a theory about what the killer was thinking. And here's what he has come up with. Come what may, Jen had to be silenced for good. Her death had to look as natural as possible, and it had to be carried out in the greatest of secrecy. The minimum of help had to be depended on, and Jen had to be caught off guard. She was not supposed to have suspected anything. He had to lure her to his hotel room with a very plausible excuse, because Jen was a very, very smart lady, and she would quickly sense a trap. The arrest. On a late summer's day, as parents and the kids were doing their best to enjoy the last days of summer, of a beautiful, beautiful summer, and as the sun was still a very golden one, and the birds were still not ready to migrate southwards, men in suits with badges pinned to their collars had entered a prominent office tower in the downtown core of a European city. They wore very somber looks as they boarded the elevator and had alighted on the 50th floor. The carpet was extra thick and plush, as the two suited men had walked purposefully towards a large door. The door was golden, and it was handsome in its own right, and the door bore a very distinct name. They knocked softly and were allowed in, and then they had been escorted to a huge corner office that looked out onto the main thoroughfare of the city. The man behind the desk rose gracefully to greet his visitors, and soon enough it was all over. The man behind the desk had left through a back door, and this door was behind his desk, and he had been escorted out of the building by the two suited men. He had been bundled quickly into an unmarked car and driven away. No one walking along in that particular area at that particular time could have suspected what was going on, and the media had never had a chance to catch their collective breaths. Well, can you guess who had been arrested? Was it Emile Gagne, the high-profile international banker who had deep, dark secrets to hide and who had recently dumped Jen Schuyler because she knew his deep, dark secrets and she had been blackmailing him at the time of her death? Now their relationship had turned into one of toxic hatred. Was it Sven Shoemaker, the wealthy international playboy who had become obsessed with Jen? Even after she had dumped him, after learning about his money laundering activities, and she had been running from him at the time of her death? Or was it Gino Maserati, the international mafia boss who had taken Jen Schuyler under his wing, had taught her the ropes, and had treated her like his own daughter? But when Jen had recently backed out of his ventures, and especially those of his international schemes, he felt that he had had to silence her, and he had been encouraged to do so by his associates. Ooh, lots to consider, eh? My. But you know what? It's time to go to court, and let's see what we can figure out here. It was an early November morning, and the courtroom was practically overflowing with the media and the who's who of everything as the suspect was led in. Some were there out of curiosity. Others were there as supporters of the defendant. And the media was there in droves. The defendant had sat quite upright next to his lawyer and had risen in a dignified manner when the judge had walked in. He had worn a grey pinstripe suit with a button-down white Oxford shirt and a red tie. Man, was he handsome. He did not smile and looked straight ahead, and the prosecution proffered the following case. The defendant had used his persuasive powers to lure Jen to his hotel suite on the evening in question. He had told her that he had wanted to patch things up with her, and that he had wanted her to forgive him for what he had done to her. His emails and text messages had been produced as evidence. The defendant had told Jen that he would be in town for a few days, and had suggested that his hotel suite would be a perfect spot for them to meet and patch up their relationship and their differences. Jen had fallen for this trap, and after some hesitation had agreed to meet the defendant at his hotel room that evening. The prosecution had produced evidence to show that the defendant had indeed flown into the city earlier that day from Europe, and the hotel staff had confirmed that a sumptuous dinner had been served to the defendant's room, and that dinner had included a very expensive bottle of champagne. The prosecution alleged that the defendant had deliberately slipped a lethal dose of pills into Jen's champagne, and that this had triggered a massive heart attack. They further alleged that when Jen had become unconscious, the defendant had gotten his assistant to dispose of her, and that the assistant had done so by bundling into a bright purple parka, which the defendant had bought beforehand in anticipation of this happening. Then the assistant had walked her down into the elevator, making it look as if she were drunk as they walked. The assistant had then taken Jen to a snow-covered pond and had buried her in a huge snowbank. Jen had still been alive, but barely, when she was buried. The prosecution further alleged that all of this had been carefully planned between the defendant and his assistant beforehand, and that the assistant had been waiting for his boss's call on that very fateful night. Finally, the prosecution further alleged that the defendant had wanted to silence Jen for good, because she was about to disclose evidence about him to the FBI. Evidence, if proven, would send him to prison for life. The prosecution had produced a mini tape recorder which Jen had somehow managed to attach to the inside of her very bulky sweater. And the recorder had picked up a clear enough recording of her meeting with the defendant. Somehow, the recorder had managed to survive the sub-zero temperatures strapped snugly to the inside of her sweater. The defense proffered the following, and we will always expect the defense to proffer a defense. The defendant did not deny having lured Jen to his hotel room, but he categorically denied having poisoned her and then having had his assistant take her away and have her buried in a snowbank. He confirmed all the facts of their meeting, and his offer to Jen in return for her silence. Jen had listened and said that she had wanted time to think things through. Jen and the defendant had enjoyed an amiable enough dinner, which had consisted of champagne along with a very sumptuous meal. But towards the end of the meal, the defendant had stated that Jen had suddenly grown tired and had asked to lay down on his couch. He had helped her to the couch and had excused himself to go to the washroom, and when he had returned a few minutes later, Jen was gone. He did not think anything of it until late the next day, when it was all over the news that Jen Schuyler was missing. Her housekeeper had reported to the cops that she had not returned from her dinner, and that Jen had specifically told her that if she had not returned by the following morning, that the housekeeper was to call the cops. The defendant stated that he was very shocked to see all of this on the news, and that he had done his best to cooperate with the investigators up until his arrest. He further denied that his assistant had ever touched Jen's body, let alone having taken the body out to a snowbank and bury it. The defendant's assistant had testified on behalf of his employer. He pleaded not guilty, and now it was time for the jury to make their decision. According to Alex, he felt that in the minds of the jury, the following thoughts should be going through their minds and that they should be discussing with each other. And he's thinking that the jury would probably not have had much difficulty in reaching a unanimous decision. An open and shut case. How open and shut? We sent Chip to mingle with the crowd outside of the court while the jury was sequestered in their deliberation. Well, the spectators, along with the media, all seemed to agree that the defendant should be found guilty. No one was buying his story, and now his secret was out anyway. The facts were horrific, and no wonder he had wanted to silence Jen for good. However, there were the tiny few who had felt that this defendant just did not look like a killer. I guess because he was handsome. I guess because he just didn't look like it. So we took a straw poll, and and it was 98% for a guilty verdict and a 2% for a not guilty verdict. So the verdict. Defendant was found guilty of first-degree murder. My goodness. His conduct was the operating and substantial cause of death. That's according to the jury. So who was the real killer, folks? Who do you think really done it? The real killer was Sven Shoemaker. And I'll tell you the story. Playboy Sven Shoemaker almost got away with it. But were it not for some extra digging, he would have done so, and an innocent man would have gone to jail. Suffice it to say that Sven Shoemaker had been stalking Jen for a while until her demise. He had somehow managed to bribe one of her staff to spy for him. And so he had gotten to know about her meeting on that fateful evening. That meeting had been indeed with Emile Gagne, and the secret that Jen had uncovered, the one that Emile had not wanted to see the day of light or the light of day, was he had been responsible for the deaths of at least 3 women that he had had affairs with before he had met Jen. And there may have been others as well. Sven Shoemaker had devised a master plan to kill Jen. It was a rather simple but very devious one. He had gotten his men to dress like hotel staff, and they had intercepted the real hotel staff. They had taken possession of the trolley and had had no difficulty gaining entry to Emile's room. And then they had gone to work. They arranged and served the dinner and had made sure that Jen's was laced with lethal doses of poison. They knew exactly how it was going to work and had hidden and waited outside as dinner had progressed in the room. They watched as Jen had started to feel unwell, and after Emile had excused himself to go to the washroom, they hurried inside and had picked up an almost unconscious Jen from the couch. They then had bundled her into the purple parka which they had brought with them, and then had walked her down in the elevator, making it look as if she was drunk and that they were helping her. Then they had half dragged and half walked her to a waiting car, and then they had driven her to a snow-covered pond, and there they had buried her in a lofty snowbank. Had Emile not excused himself to go to the washroom, they would have used a backup plan in order to snatch Jen. There you have it, folks, the episode of Dario's daughter. A very sad ending for young Jennifer Schuyler, who had had everything in life. A loving dad who had wanted to give her everything, but alas, Jennifer had wanted something entirely different. Jennifer wanted venture and adventure, and she did get it, but she did not survive it. I hope you enjoyed this or today's episode. I do thank you for having stopped by to listen. I want to wish you a great, great day and a terrific rest of the week. Take care of yourselves and please do not forget to keep on smiling. Remember now, if you smile at the world, it will surely smile back at you. Take care and bye for now.